Hey, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about 4 workflow tips to help you work more efficiently with Limber. Now, I know you probably clicked on this video because of the thumbnail. You want to know how to add that seam to your rigs. You're going to have to wait till the end of the video before we get to that, but don't skip ahead. Don't sleep on these other 3 tips. They're all really useful tips and will help you to work more efficiently. So with that being said, let's stop dabbling around and let's just get into it. Okay, for this first workflow tip, I want to introduce you to this little girl character rig that I have that I've rigged up. And we're going to talk about one of the buttons on the Limber panel here that I think is criminally underappreciated, and that is the hide and show button. And this character rig is a perfect example of where this particular button comes into handy because our character is so small. All the control layers are kind of covering up the artwork underneath. And sometimes it's nice to just have a clean view of your character rig, especially when it's this small, to be able to finesse your animations. Now, of course, I could come over here and I could grab my controller layers and I could use the plus or minus size. Holding Alt, I could make the controller layers smaller so that they're not covering up anything, obviously. But the risk you run into with that is that you make them small and then they might be hard to see, or in this case, maybe I just don't want to have to click on something so small, right? It's not that hard, but when you're working and you're going, you don't want to have to try to click on it, misclick it, and click the wrong thing. I might accidentally click the limb layer itself anyway. So that's not always the most ideal situation to do. But what we can do is, instead of using that button, we can use the hide and show button, and we can hide these like this. Now, when I do that, you're going to think that's pretty unremarkable. You are able to hide layers in After Effects. It's like one of the first things that you learn to do in After Effects. But if I unselect my layers, now I have a clean character rig. I'm not seeing those control layers. But you'll notice that in the timeline, the eyeballs are all still on with these control layers. And what that means is that I can still select those control layers in the composition window, and then that highlights it on my timeline, and then I can animate or keyframe those layers. If I were to come over here in my timeline and select my controller layers and turn them off, it also cleans up my composition window, but now I can't select those layers in the composition window. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, just select them down in your timeline. First of all, I don't like to have to scroll through my timeline to find the right control layer. If I'm looking for the left wrist controller, I don't want to have to scroll in my timeline. Sometimes, this is a pretty simple rig, but sometimes your rig can get a lot of layers in their timeline. This one, relatively simple, has 40 different layers. They can get up to 100 different layers, and you don't want to have to constantly be scrolling through your layers of controllers and artwork and everything trying to find the right layer to animate. I like to be able to always select a controller in my composition window. If I want the right wrist controller, I want to be able to just select that controller there. So I like to keep these on and then hide them with Limber so that I don't see them, but if I mouse over where that controller is, I can still select it. I can still animate with it. I also, and this is a bonus tip, I'm not counting this tip as part of the 4 tips I'm sharing today, but I always keep my controller layers at the top of my layer list so that they're always selectable. You never want to put your controller layers underneath your artwork layers or other layers, because then whenever you go to select them in the composition window, that layer will obstruct your ability to select that controller layer. So I always keep my controller layers at the top so that they're always selectable and easily accessible in the composition window. Okay, so this next tip is going to come in handy if you're somebody who's used to parenting your foot or hand layers to your end controllers and then animating with the end controller. Okay, so here, in order to explain this, I need to kind of set up the scenario. But here I started an animation where my character walks into the middle of the frame, stops, and now he's going to wind up and kick that soccer ball. However, I realized halfway through this animation that I actually need to be using FK to animate that wind up and kick motion rather than IK, which I'm using right now to walk into the frame. Now, if you're hearing IK and FK and you don't know what those terms mean, those are terms that have to do with character rigging. And I actually have a video where I explain what those terms mean, when you should use them, and why FK is just as important and useful as IK. So halfway through, and by the way, I'll leave a link to that video in the description so you can go check that out if that's something you need a refresher on. But anyway, so I needed to switch to FK. And whenever we switch to FK in an animation, we have to add an FK controller. Otherwise, when we switch to FK, like in this example, the foot, which is parented to the left ankle, is no longer going to follow the end of the limb. If we want it to follow the end of the limb, we have to add an FK controller that foot needs to be parented to. Now, to do that, make sure your left ankle is selected. It actually can be any layer that has to do with that limb, but I always just like to do the ankle, the end controller. I come over to the Limber panel and add FK. And Limber's going to add that FK controller, and it's going to reparent that left foot that was originally parented to the left ankle. It's now going to be reparented to that left ankle FK. What that means is now the foot is going to follow the end of our limb when we're in FK and even when we're in IK. So even as he's walking over, the foot is still going to be attached to the end of the limb because it's parented to the FK controller. Now, here's where it gets tricky though, because now you'll notice as he walks in that the foot is no longer rotating, and that's because the FK controller has no rotation keyframes. So because I didn't set this up in the beginning, I need to now go back and copy these rotation keyframes and paste them to the FK controller. But I can't just simply Control C, Control V, because each one of these rotation properties on the two controller layers here has their own unique expression that we don't want to copy over. If I just select these and press Control C, watch what happens when I paste them to the other controller. Right here it says Limber FK end rotation. When I paste those, now it says IK rotation, and we have an error. So we don't want to mess with the expressions. We want to maintain the expressions. So instead, we're going to come over here and we're going to toggle open the little option next to the rotation property, and we're going to turn off that expression. And then we're going to copy those keyframes and paste them over. And then once they're pasted over, you can get rid of them. You don't need them anymore. And you can turn that expression back on. And now, when we play this back, it should work. Boom. Hey, before we move on to the next tip, I just wanted to remind you to hit that like button. It really does help me in my battle against the YouTube algorithm, because it tells the algorithm that you like the video and that other people like you will also enjoy this video. So it puts it in front of more eyeballs, which really helps me out. Doesn't cost you anything, helps me out a lot. So go ahead and hit that like button. So now we've restored those rotation keyframes. This is also good when you're doing a walk cycle and you have animated the rotation of one arm and you just want to copy that and paste it to the other arm. When you paste those wrist rotation values from one arm to the other, you also want to turn off that expression, because the left and right arms are going to have unique expressions that refer to that arm, and you don't want to copy the left arm rotation expression that drives that over to the right arm, because it'll just mess up your rig. So anytime you're copying keyframes from a property that has an expression, you always want to turn that expression off first before you paste it over. With that being said, this next tip is actually going to help you avoid all of that mess altogether, and that is by, instead of keyframing the rotation on your FK controller, you'd actually just set it up and keyframe the rotation on the foot layer itself. Now, I want to stress that what I've been talking about with tip number 2 and this tip is this is only when you realize you need to switch to FK in the middle of an animation. You've already done some animation and you need to switch. If you set this up from the very beginning, you don't have to worry about copying over rotation keyframes because you just keyframe on the FK from the beginning. However, there are a lot of scenarios where you will realize you forgot to add an FK controller and now you need to go back and add one, because it doesn't automatically add one when you create a new limb every time, because oftentimes you don't need that FK controller. If you start setting up your characters like this by keyframing the rotation on the foot or hand layer itself, then no matter what, even if you have to add that FK controller halfway through, you don't have to ever worry about accidentally copying over a expression to the wrong layer, because that rotation keyframing is done on a completely separate layer and it works just as well, and you don't lose any of the functionality of your character rig. Now, if you want to go even a step further, what you can do is come to your original ankle controller, come to the effects and presets, come to the expression controls, and add an angle controller to your your end controller for your limb, and then just rename that. Let's say this will be ankle rotation, and then keeping that ankle controller selected, we're going to come down to the foot. Now we want to make sure that the rotation property of the foot layer is open so that we can grab this pick whip and we can connect that angle controller to it. And then we're going to come over here. We're going to turn off that expression. So we're just copying the keyframes. We're actually going to cut those keyframes. And then we're going to come up to this ankle controller, double click on this new ankle rotation that we just created. That's going to open it up in your timeline, and then make sure that your playhead is at the first frame so that the rotation keyframes line up correctly. And now we've pasted those rotation keyframes to that ankle rotation, and then we can come back over the foot, turn that expression on. So this expression is just telling it to get its rotation degrees from this ankle rotation, and now we can go back to animating the rotation of the foot from the ankle. And what's also nice about this is that we can animate everything on one controller layer, which is what I like. So we have the left ankle. When we're in IK, we can time up our rotation keyframes with the position keyframes as he takes a step, so we can see how those time up. And then we can also time up the rotation of the foot with the FK keyframes, and we can see it all on one layer, whereas before, when we split up the rotation to the FK, you had to have two layers, so you always have to make sure that the FK controller is either above or below the ankle controller. And now with this setup, we can actually just hide the FK controller. We never have to see the FK controller. We never have to select it. We can do everything from this one layer, which is really nice and makes things much more efficient. All right, and on to our fourth and final, and probably the reason why most of you clicked on this video, and that is how to do this seam down the middle of our limb. That seems to be so elusive to many people. I get this question all the time. How do I do this seam? It's a common art style, so let's tackle it right now. Now, the key to this seam is to use a bone limb. Bone limbs are different from other limber limbs because they are just a line with 3 points. So here I have a blank bone limb. And if you're wondering how I got this round cap on the top and a butt cap on the bottom, well, essentially when you create a bone limb, you just have these limb groups that you can duplicate and you can layer them. And so this is my pant leg, which is just the limb with butt cap. And then this one is a round cap, which is the same exact group, except I've added a trim path and I've change the end to 1%. So it's just trimming that stroke all the way up until the end. And then this stroke is set to a round cap. And so it's creating that circle at the top of the limb. So we're actually going to use the same technique of layering different strokes to create that seam. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate the pants, and I'm going to come in to the color, and I'm going to change it to a brighter color. And then I'll change the width of that stroke down to, let's say, like 4. So now we have that stroke down the middle. And there we go. We have a seam. It works perfectly. And the great thing is because we're just using that same line, if I come over to the shape and I want to add some curvature, that seam is going to adjust to the curvature of our limb. However, if we want to do like a 3/4 perspective character rig, then we can come over here to the new pant group, which I'm going to rename to seam. And I'm going to come to the transform properties, and I'm just going to move that over. So it's kind of going down the side, but it's from a 3/4 perspective. Now there is an issue when you do this, because now when we bend the limb, that seam is going to extend past the end of our limb. We don't want that. So to fix that, we can do something like this, where we have like a little cuff at the end of our pant. And this cuff is actually serving to kind of mask that, that stroke going beyond the end of our limb. So one thing I'm going to do is, the first thing is I'm going to extend the limb and bend it to further than I think I'll ever have to bend it for my animation. Usually your limbs aren't going to bend this much, but now I'm going to grab that seam group, and I'm going to add a trim pass to that. And then I'm just going to zoom in here so that I can see what I'm doing. And I'm just going to trim that back a little bit. Now, the problem is when we go back to being straight, then it's a little bit short. So I'm actually going to just match this up with the end of the limb. And this is a great situation where we'd want to use that hide function so that we can see where the end of our limb is. Now it's matched up there. And because we're using the hide, I can just select this and bring it back to being straight. And now the issue is that the seam is a little bit short. Now, depending on your art style, maybe that's okay. But we're going to kind of mask this by adding a cuff to the end. And to create that cuff, we're going to use the same technique. I'm going to grab the pant layer, duplicate it, and rename this to cuff. And I'm going to create that line across the pant leg. So I'm going to grab that color. And then on this one, we're going to add a trim pass to the cuff. And I'm going to change that to 1%. We get that line. We're basically just trimming that thick stroke down to one little teeny tiny sliver. And then we can use the offset to bring that down to the bottom. And maybe I don't even need to line it up with the bottom. I just want the cuff to be like that thick. And now we just need to then duplicate the pants again and put that on top. Again, remember our pant group here is just this stroke. And so now with this new pant layer, or this group, I'll add a trim pass, and I will trim the start until we see that cuff seam, and then I'll just gradually bring that up to the line. So this new pants 2 group is covering the end of that seam. So there we go. Now we have a leg with a seam down the side of it, and everything works perfectly fine. Now your next natural question might be, what if you're using a custom limb and not a bone limb? Can you create that seam? Well, you can. It doesn't always work well or as well as the bone method, but you can do it. What you need to do is, first you need to add a joint to the middle of your limb. So if we go over to limber and we go to add a joint, it's going to ask us to name that joint, and we can name it. I have it just default to knee. So now we have a knee joint, and we want to change that knee joint's rotation to outwards. So no matter how the knee is rotated, it's always going to be pointed outwards in its rotation. Now we can come over to our pen tool, make sure we don't have any layers selected because we don't want to add this seam to an existing layer. We want to create a new layer, and I'll just create a line with 3 points to correspond with each joint. And just to make this easier to see, we'll do like a yellow line, we'll do a blue line. And we'll make it like 8 thick. There we go. That makes it easy to see. And then we're going to come over to window, and we are going to use the create nulls from paths. We're going to bring up that script, and then go to that shape layer we just selected, open it up, make sure we have the path selected of the line we just drew. And then we're going to do points follow nulls. And what this is going to do is going to create a null for each one of those points. And now to move those points around, we just have a null here. And I can come over here, and we're going to actually turn off the fill. And this just makes it so that we can actually parent the points to another layer. Otherwise, you can't parent points of a layer of a shape path to layers without knowing a bunch of expressions. So now we don't need to know any expressions. We can just parent this to the ankle, parent this to the knee. And that's the reason why we created that knee joint, is so that we have something to parent that middle null object to. Otherwise, we wouldn't have anything to parent it to. And parent this to the hip, and then just position those however you want. Okay, and then once everything's into place, I want to come over here and turn up the rotate end to 100% and the rotate start to 100%. And we don't need to do anything about the knee. And there you go. Now you have a seam that's going to follow the middle of your leg. And if you want to move that seam left or right to create that 3/4 perspective, you're going to run into some of the same issues that you do on the other limb that we set up. And you'd have to use some masking to correct for those issues. And there's even other things, like you could probably go into Duik and use a connector to trim that line according to the bend of your knee. I'm not going to get that in depth in this video. We already gone long enough. But I just wanted to show you that even doing this seam on a custom limb is also possible. It's just a little bit more involved. So there you go. So whether you've been using Limber for a while now or you just picked it up, I hope that you learned something new in this video. If you did find this video insightful, make sure you show me by hitting that like button. Also, if you have not yet picked up Limber, I highly suggest that you do. It's the best character animation tool for After Effects. I've left the link down in the description. Full disclosure, it is an affiliate link, and it's a great way for you to get incredible value and also support the channel. And as a thank you, I've also left a discount code with that link so you can get a little bit of a discount on Limber. And then if you want more videos like this in the future, make sure you're subscribed with the bell notification turned on. Also, if you want to stay informed on everything that we're doing at Keyframe Academy, make sure you head over to our website, keyframeacademy.com, link in the description, and sign up for our newsletter. We don't send out emails every single week, so it's not really a newsletter, but it's just a way for us to let you know when new courses come out and when we are running a discount on our current courses like Character Animation Launchpad, which teaches you everything you need to know about character animation. But only go sign up for that email list if you're interested in receiving those updates from us. If not, don't worry about it. No hard feelings on my part. Your view, like, subscription here on YouTube is more than enough. So thank you again for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.